Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson, Senior Editor for Gold Derby, and I am joined by Robert Martinez, an Emmy and American Cinema Editors nominee for the Bee Gees' How Can You Mend a Broken Heart documentary. And Robert, we're here today to talk about your work on Lucy and Desi on Amazon Prime. Did your success on the Bee Gees doc, make you more confident leading into this project about two of TV's most legendary figures, or what led you into this?
I think the opportunity for the project, or for me to edit this one, came as a result of Bee Gees. Confidence, probably not. I mean, I think a lot of my confidence for this, being the right time and the right crew to do this, probably came when Amy Poehler was brought on as director. I knew that, me as a male editor, profiling one of the most, if not the most famous comedic actors of all time, was a little unnerving. But knowing that Amy was there to kind of, confirm any sort of stuff that I thought, or call it any possible blind spots that I might have, that was reassuring.
And you mentioned Amy directs, and when you first met with her, what was she like? What did she tell you her vision for this was? What story did she want to tell with these two?
I think for Lucy and Desi specifically, and for large television and movie stars, she was very clear that history tends to make these people two-dimensional and make them these icons or legends, and those sort of those words get thrown around kind of frivolously, but we wanted to know the people, tell a human story, show the a more intimate sort of angle of who these people were and the effect they had on each other.
And I was pulled in right from the opening sequence because it's Lucy's voice. There's images of these tapes and old home movies of Lucy and Desi. So let's just start there. How much archival footage are we talking about here that you're presented with? And maybe just starting with the home videos, some of this stuff that I've never seen. Start with those personal home movies. Where did that come from? And then how do you get started?
Yeah, we had a great relationship with Lucy and Desi estate, primarily dealing with their daughter, Lucy Arnaz Luckenbill, who was just an amazing person and a very open collaborator and through this whole process. So she kind of opened the vault for us on that. And the first thing that catches your eye are the home videos, because it is totally, there's no guard up. It's completely a verite type of thing. They're not acting or it's like anybody's home videos. You can relate to that. But the other big revelation was these audio tapes that it was kind of our producer, Jeannie Alpha Festa found, kind of pointed up to a shelf and said, what's that box? And they're like, I don't know, it's these tapes. And that ended up being like this big reason why this project feels so intimate, because we were at that point, once we digitized those and got to listen to them, gave us the opportunity to tell the story in their own words, which I don't know if any other project has had that advantage.
So you were already working on the project and you just stumbled into that. So that was just luck.
I wasn't even on yet. I mean, I was on something else, and then I get a text from our writer, a producer, Mark Monroe, and he's like, "Hey, we found these tapes. This is good news." So it was like that was when we knew that it was going to be a huge weapon for us in telling the story, because with docs, the tough thing is not creating something new or weird. A lot of times it's just telling the actual story. That's the hardest part, because you don't have a piece of archival, or they didn't take pictures that day, or no one talks about it. So a lot of times, like, the difficulty is just telling the truth. So when you get those tapes, it's kind of a godsend.
Wow. And then the I Love Lucy episodes, there's so many of those. How do you then kind of rifle through all of that work and pick and choose what scenes, which episodes are going to fit the best for this story of their lives that you're telling?
Right. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, we not only have I Love Lucy, we have the Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, which came right after. It's kind of part of I Love Lucy, and then you have the subsequent shows. You have the Lucy Show. It's kind of endless.
And Carol Burnett and all of it.
Yeah, the guest spots that she did and the films that they did. So I think I didn't watch any of the episodes beyond what I knew as a kid. I didn't watch anything for the purpose of this project until we kind of knew what the story was and what we wanted to tell. So once we kind of mapped out the story beats and our angle, which was a love story, it was Lucy and Desi's love story, then I could view those episodes in a different way. I wasn't just watching them for pure entertainment and pulling things that I thought were funny just for the sake of comedy. We had to be doing three different things at once with these show clips. So it had to kind of push the story forward. So if we had something where we wanted to talk about, any sort of friction in the relationship, we could pull it from the show. And the show's pretty self-referential. I mean, there's a reason why there's a lot of I Love Lucy fandom, because it's a very dense type of show. I mean, they reference stuff from her hometown, Jamestown. Like there's a Orson Welles episode where she talks about Jamestown and going to Jamestown High School. So there are these like little nuggets that watching this, I was like, that's really cool. I can't use it, but it's really interesting.
What is it like as an editor working with so much archival footage rather than footage that's actually shot in, present time by the director, like the interviews that are taking place? Is it more complicated? Is it different types of materials that you have to use? What's the biggest difference when you're working with archival versus current footage?
I mean, for me personally, I worked mostly on archival heavy projects. So I sometimes get the luxury of getting like, modern day verite scenes or stuff like that. But Bee Gees was a archive heavy film because we only had one brother, right? And then Pavarotti I worked on as additional editor, and we don't have Pavarotti. He's not around anymore. So it was archival heavy as well. So for this, it was sort of in my wheelhouse, I guess, to kind of deal with it that way. We did go out to Jamestown and shoot some stuff around her childhood home and stuff like that. But I think we found that the strength was in the archive. It wasn't in going to, say, the studio space in Hollywood where they used to film the shows or anything like that. It was really kind of immersing ourselves in that time period and feeling like it was unfolding in real time. And instead of us looking back, and I think that was one of the toughest things, was you're trying to keep them alive, right? We know that they've passed and we know that they're no longer with us, but you want to infuse life into those characters. So shooting a modern day scene might not be the best way to do that.
Were there any editing sort of, tricks or anything that might surprise viewers for something like a Lucy and Desi, like visual effects? Is there something in there that, we're watching and it's beautiful, but we don't realize how much work you're actually putting into it?
It's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that. I think we wanted to keep true, we didn't want to pull too many tricks with this one. So, because if the audience were to catch something tricky, they might not trust that we're telling a very truthful thing at that point, that we're trying to pull any wool over anyone's eyes. But not on this one. I don't think so. I think for this, we really leaned into the archival and the special circumstances under which we got to use that stuff. But I don't have a good answer for that one.
And then how do you know when you're done, when you're complete? Do you start with a 5-hour movie and winnow it away, or is that not how you work? What's your process?
Somewhere in between, not 5 hours, but somewhere in between there. I mean, it was, I think the rough cut was around 3 hours, which is not like a very fair position to put anyone into to watch a 3-hour rough cut. It's not the way I wanted to do it, but we did sort of lay out all the pieces and say, okay, what's important here? What do we want to move around? Because at that point, we could sort of move around these chess pieces, but we could have told the story in a million different ways, and that was the difficulty. You know, you could tell this could be just a story about I Love Lucy, just a story about Desi, just a story about the relationship with their kids. But once we figured out what we wanted to say, which was to highlight their love story, it became a lot easier to whittle that down into what became, I think, like an hour and 45 or something.
And when you look back on the project, was there a favorite scene or something that you took away from this project that you learned that you'll take with you?
Yeah, I mean, I the idea of a multiracial couple kind of working their way through Hollywood, that's really special. I mean, I'm kind of blown away that they figured out how to do that in that time. I don't know if anyone has a real succinct answer on how they got past all those gatekeepers and were able to get away with this. I mean, it makes it a very American story, because it's sort of that American ideal. If we can get past all the prejudice and actually give people the opportunity to bring diverse opinions and diverse views to the table, that's when we create the best work. And they were able to do that through a lot of bullshit. So that's where I'll probably take away. That's what's most impactful for me.
Well, Lucy and Desi is currently streaming on Amazon Prime. Robert, congratulations on your great work. Best of luck at this year's Emmys, and thanks for chatting with Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby. I'm joined by Cindy Mollo, the Emmy-nominated and American Cinema Editors Award-winning editor of Ozark on Netflix. And Cindy, first of all, congratulations on this final season of Ozark. It's been such a huge success for Netflix and the entire cast and crew. What has that been like for you to sort of see that all come to a close now?
It's been really fun. It's the first time I've ever been like a completist, where I've done the first episode of a series and the finale. And I didn't anticipate how cool that would feel. And the audience has been so excited to have these last 7 drop. And I think it was fun for them because they just watched the first 7 of season 4. And then just 2 months later, they get this wrap up. And it seems like the audience has been really satisfied. So that's gratifying.
What do you remember about making that final cut?
There were a number of days where I would finish watching dailies on a scene and think to myself, that's my last scene with such and such a character. That's my last scene with that character. It was oddly emotional because, you know, most of the time when you're working on a series, you're doing one episode in the middle of the season, or even if you're doing the first or last, you know, there's another season, or you hope there's another season. But this was so definitely the end of a really positive experience that I think for the first time in my career, I really felt grateful every day and didn't take any of those last days for granted.
What do you think it was about Ozark that struck such a chord with people? I mean, it's been such a success. It's not your first. I mean, you worked on Deadwood and Mad Men. What is it about Ozark, do you think, that really got people to love it?
I think there's a really successful formula, and I've actually worked on 2 other series that sort of followed this formula, Homicide and Oz. In the first seasons of those shows, you're with a character who's being introduced into the world. So in Homicide, it's someone who's joining the police force from like the mayor's security detail, and you learn about police detective work through him. And in Oz, it's a guy who seems like you or I. He has an accident and kills a girl, and he ends up in prison. Well, here you start out thinking the Byrdes are like any other family, especially because it's Jason Bateman and Laura Linney, 2 actors we know well from other projects, but we don't think of them as playing criminal types. And so we learn about this world through them, assuming that they're just like us. And over 4 seasons, we learn that they are very much not like us in both good and bad ways. And so that was a really satisfying experience to kind of go through that journey.
And what is the editing collaboration like on Ozark? Because people direct certain episodes. How do you figure out which ones you want to take the lead on? And then how do you split those up?
Well, I don't really have a choice in that we alternate each season. Whoever finished the season before starts the next season. And Vix Patel and I and Heather Goodwin Floyd were editors on the season from the beginning. So you kind of know who's starting off. The fourth season was unusual because instead of 10 episodes, we had 14. And we had some episodes that were directed by individual directors instead of directors taking a block. So this season was a little different, and we also knew it would air in two chunks, be dropped in two chunks. So going in, I knew I was doing some episodes in the middle, and then I knew I was doing the first one of the last 7. But I didn't know right away that I was doing the finale because we had some directors' schedules shift around before Jason was definitely going to direct the finale. So it's the interesting thing about television. You don't have a choice always of what episodes you edit, and therefore you don't know which scripts you're going to be working on. So there's a lot of randomness to it. But on a show like Ozark, you never lose.
Yeah. And how much leeway are you given in that editor's suite? I mean, you're given all this footage, right? So you're kind of trying to ruffle through it. How much do you get to say, this is the cut I want? And then how much is Jason in there saying, no, I know this happened and I want this? What is that going on at all?
Yeah, to some extent, but maybe not exactly that way. It's a very collaborative process. And in my editor's cut, I try to put together the best choices that I see. I've also now worked with Jason. I guess this was our 5th episode together, so I know his taste. And physically, I was in the office with Chris Mundy, the showrunner. He was down the hall. So I approach the editor's cut with my own taste and my own choices, but I can always ask a question like, hey, what do you think of this? And how about that? So I put my best foot forward in that editor's cut. Jason comes in, and in many cases, he has a very definite idea of how he wants the scene to be put together. And in many cases, that's obvious from looking at the footage. You go, oh, this looks like the kind of shot he would like to start on, or he shot coverage, but I think he really wants this to be all in one. So let me see if that master shot holds up. So you put those things together, and there'll always be a number of scenes where he has a definite idea. And then there are some scenes where he might say, oh, that's interesting what you do there. I thought I would, maybe take all the coverage from the other side, but I see what you're doing. Let's either go with your way, my way, or a third way. Like there is collaboration. But there's also a lot of respect for what the editor does in that first pass, because we've all been with the show, since the beginning.
How many times do you find like a treasure that you weren't expecting in like a reaction shot? I mean, are you getting a lot of those? Like, is that sort of the joy in it sometimes, is like looking for those small moments that you might not expect, that only happen once, that aren't repeated?
I love those things. And when I watch dailies, I always make a note of them. If there's something that's a little different. These actors are so good that you get maybe the first couple of takes, they're kind of finding their rhythm, but then they are pretty much locked in. And but I'm always looking for the serendipitous, oh, wow, she smiled when she said that. Whereas in all the other takes, she had a very stone face, and that smile is kind of chilling. I'm going to go with that. So always looking for those kind of moments.
And how long is that process of just editing one episode? I mean, it seems like a daunting task. How long does that take?
It's always hard to say, because we shoot for, I think it was 12 or 14 days an episode, maybe 12 typically. Most directors do a block, so it's 24 days of shooting 2 episodes. And then I get, it's all broken up, so I never think of it as like one big chunk of time, but I'll get 4 days for my editor's cut, where I've been piecing the show together as they've been shooting, but now I see it all together, and I might alter some performances. I might change some music that I thought was right when I first started cutting a scene, but then you get the whole show put together and this beat doesn't feel quite right, so you make adjustments. Then I work for 4 days per episode with the director. Because Jason's a director and an executive producer, we'll do a few more days because we roll right into his cut with Chris Mundy. And, we had some things on this episode that were a little bit, on the finale, that were a little bit of a challenge, and we bounced back and forth between ideas. And the lovely thing about working with the star director EP is that you can indulge those choices and compare versions, and then feel like when you lock picture, you've really gone with the best moment.
What was your favorite scene or episode from this final season of shooting that you had that you look back and think, that was just fun to be a part of, or challenging?
I for some reason in my memory now, I think of all the great moments when Wendy lied, just outright lied to someone's face. And she's such a good actor, and she plays that kind of, I don't want to say uber sweetness, because that will sound like, that sounds like bad acting, but she can play the sweet Midwestern woman who you would never think would do anything wrong, but because you just saw her do the bad thing in the previous scene, she's lying. And so I think of when she lied to Ruth about Javi's gone to Mexico for 3 months, but don't worry, we'll help you get him when he comes back. And then when Ruth confronts her in the restaurant at the end and says, you said he was gone. And Wendy just looks at her stone-faced and says, I lied. And I love that. And yet in the same scene, sometimes she was outraged in that same scene at the dinner in the restaurant that Marty knew that Ruth was in Chicago and never said anything. Like, the lies upon lies, I think, are what I delight in the most. And then in a scene at the top of the next episode, the outrage that the other person lied, or that did something behind someone's back. I just laugh. I think, I laugh like I'm cutting a comedy, because it's just people doing the most human things possible, and lying to each other about it.
Well, Cindy Mollo, congratulations on all of your work on Ozark. We're wishing you and the entire cast and crew the best of luck at this year's Emmys. And thank you so much for chatting with Gold Derby.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your interest, as always.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby, and I am joined by Jamie Martin, who has won 3 Emmy Awards among 5 nominations for RuPaul's Drag Race. She's also put her skills to work in shows like Below Deck, The Real World, 10 Things You Don't Know About. Jamie, so there's so much heart and joy and drama in this show. What has been the most fun for you about being part of this cultural phenomenon, RuPaul's Drag Race?
Editing the show, always the stories that the queens bring, they always bring so much heart and their selves into it, and being able to showcase that with all these different queens and throughout the seasons is always the most fun thing to do. The other thing that just keeps it fresh is that every season and every show has a different theme, a different tone. And as an editor, to be able to kind of bend and shift in that throughout each season, it just keeps you on your toes and keeps everything interesting. So those are my favorite things working on it.
What's your goal with each episode? Like, what makes you sit back and say, okay, I've done my job, this looks good?
I think my goal, and everyone on our team's goal, is to tell the stories of the queens like very truthfully, and in a way that the audience can really connect with. And so I think when we have those elements mixed in with our competition elements, it only enhances all the competition. I feel like without really connecting with the queens on those authentic levels in their personal lives and their style, the competition wouldn't feel as dynamic. You know, you really have to know where the queens are coming from to know why this challenge specifically matters to them. And so I think when we can connect those dots throughout an episode specifically, that's when I'm like, that one zinged, you know. So that's kind of my goal when sitting back and seeing the episode as a whole, is if everything tracks for that purpose.
And reality TV can get interesting. There's some big personalities, especially on, you know, RuPaul's Drag Race. As RuPaul likes to say, you know, the library is open for reading. So do you ever get frustrated after a show airs and people are like, oh, I was edited badly. You know, they made me look a bad way. You know, what do you think about those comments?
I mean, I definitely, like I said, our goal is never that. We want to tell the story authentically. However, you know, the process of a huge reality show like this is that you film for so long, for multiple days, and that footage just has to be whittled down. So I do understand when people see their actions over 3 days combined into one, how it is a little jarring. I can imagine. I mean, I hate watching myself on film. I can imagine that not being your favorite thing, you know, but like I try to keep in mind that, you know, we are really trying to put something out authentically, and we're not overtly trying to change the storyline of characters. So I understand where those opinions could come from. But I also know that like our show and our team, and compared to other shows that I've worked on, like our producing team so cares and is involved in all of the queens' stories and characters and communication even after filming is done. Like everyone on this team really does care about the queens. So I think you just have to take it with a grain of salt, you know, that everyone can have their opinion on that. But as being involved in the process of it, I know that we really are trying our best to put out what happened in a way that the audience could track and not change the narrative like that.
How much footage do you have when you begin to edit an episode? You know, what's the Cliff Notes version for people like me who don't understand it, of, you know, filming begins, this is the episode, you have to finalize it. Right.
I mean, it is definitely a mountain. We have each episode is usually filmed between 2 days, sometimes a third day if there's like a live component to it, like a dance component to it. And those days are filmed like 8 to 10 hours a day, and you've got 6 to 8 cameras going at each time. So it is a mountain of footage that you have to go through. And then on top of that, we have our interviews that are shot on different days. So, you know, I can only be super thankful that we have super talented story team working with us that really, when we are looking for things specifically like that, are able to help us and really guide us where each character's story needs to be going throughout the story arc of this whole season. So that when we have that guidance from our story team, it makes kind of digging through all that footage a bit easier. You know what you're looking for going into it. And sometimes you're lucky and you find things you weren't looking for that are just awesome little nuggets that you want to include too. So that's always fun, looking just through the raw and finding amazing just character moments for these people who, you know, they're just messing around in the workroom, and you have fun seeing them messing around in the workroom and forming relationships with each other, which is really awesome.
And what's the collaboration like then with you and other departments? I mean, how many hands is this touching, and who are you working with to make sure these episodes get out on time?
Yeah, so we start and we have a general rough string of where the episode should go from our story department and our EPs that are very involved as well. And then we take it from there. We edit for pace and tone and make sure that everyone's being represented on the show. And then it's a notes process. It's a notes process between our EPs and our network. And through back and forth on that, we get it to air, which is a hurdle sometimes, but it's really collaborative. But the editors have so much say on this show in terms of like bringing the fun to it. It's a very self-referential show, and the tone is really different from a lot of reality shows I've worked on, and that it's kind of tongue in cheek and everything. And so we have to make sure that we're bringing that to our edits a lot. It's a lot of keeping in mind that it's competition and, oh, it's serious, 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 and then kind of cap it off with a sad trombone sound. It's that build, and then, but really remember we're a Drag Race. So that's like a huge part of our edit process, is making sure that those elements are there throughout all the rounds of notes and getting it to air.
And what are those interview segments like? Are those like taken periodically throughout production, or do they all come in at the end to sort of recap their experience?
Yeah, so they're taken throughout production.
Okay.
They are usually scheduled, for the mornings or the afternoons, or when there's a downtime in actual filming the reality part of the show. And they do have a large interview package at the very beginning to kind of set up who they are and kind of give us an overall feel of who they are just in the outside world. And so we have a large interview day in the beginning, like right before they film. And we do kind of bounce to that interview sometimes to kind of carry us along throughout the season, but it is really regularly filmed throughout the show filming. So it's in the moment stuff that you're getting, they're able to comment, not 3 weeks later, they're able to comment within the next day or so. So.
What was that Emmy recognition like for you? Not just the nomination the first time, but the wins as well. What was that feeling like? And what do you remember most about your first Emmy ceremony?
I remember being really, really nervous. But I've been working on the show for about 10 years now. And so we got our first Emmy nomination 6 or 7 years into me working on the show. It was really unexpected for all of us. And we're such a small, tight team. Like, it really is a family in terms of our EPs and our editors team, editing team, and our story producers and everybody involved. And so we've always had this kind of like small family dynamic where we all get the show and we all understand the moving parts of the show. And that hasn't changed since getting all this Emmy recognition, but it's so strange to be like, the whole world is now watching our little family dynamic almost. It still feels that same way, where like we all care so deeply about the show and are so involved in every single episode. But like, since the Emmy thing, it has been like, our viewership has gone up and all the recognition. It's been incredible. It hasn't changed our little family dynamic, which is, I think, incredible for this show. Like, I feel like that's a huge part of how it's maintained its style and its tone. But yeah, I remember that first Emmy ceremony being extremely nervous and very surprised and very honored that people in our industry recognized the uniqueness of our show and how much it touched audiences, and how the editing is, I think, funny. I think it's unique, So that's what I remembered for the first show the most. Yeah.
Well, Jamie, congratulations on all of your work on RuPaul's Drag Race. Best of luck at this year's Emmy Awards, and thanks for chatting with Gold Derby today.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby. I'm here with Melissa McCoy, an Emmy nominee and American Cinema Editors winner for Ted Lasso. Melissa, this series is defined as a comedy, which it is. It's very funny, of course, but there's also dramatic elements intertwined, and there's a depth to these people. How do you navigate the tone of Ted Lasso and make sure the audience is feeling what you've intended them to feel?
Yeah, we work really hard with that, because it's always comes back to, are we being honest and truthful to these characters? And the writers and Jason have imbued them with such deep, rich backstories, and they will share those little nuggets with us. Like, this line that Rupert says to Rebecca hits different because in their past, this happened. And it's always coming from a real place. and the actors, I think, know those places sometimes. And so it's easy for us, I feel like, when it's to just go to those places, because the actors are amazing. Like, their performances are so beautiful and real. And so when they're being sincere and honest, or, you know, in a place where it's more dramatic, it's coming from a real place, but the humor is also coming from that place. You know, yeah, we have some kind of absurdist things that happen. But for the most part, it's, you know, your office comedy, your family, it's a family comedy, and you have your, you know, team. It's, you know, the team is a family. So it's very much, you know, kind of like with your family, there's the ups and the downs, and you laugh in the good times, and you're there for each other in the bad times. And I think that's kind of what we found this show is. And we really try to lean into that aspect, that this is our ragtag family, and you love them, flaws and all, and in good times and bad, sort of thing. And we just lean into that.
So as an editor, you know, you sent all this footage. What is that like for you on a day-to-day basis, in terms of how much you're getting to work with, and how much say do you have then when you're editing, like, oh, this is the funniest clip, I want this in, and who, if anyone, can come in and override that decision that you're making?
So we get lots of leeway with that. I mean, like right now we're, you know, in the middle of season 3, and everybody's off in London, and my cohort AJ and I are back in LA, and it's just us in the footage right now. So it's very freeing in that way. And we always just go with, this makes me laugh. But, you know, if they do a run and there's different options, I always cut alt bins, because what I think is funny is, you know, somebody else thinks this is more funny. Basically, it comes down to Jason in the end. You know, we have really long conversations about all the different beats, and they always have to come from a place of intention. But he's, you know, just like Ted Lasso, he is such a team builder and really empowers you to feel your power. And as long as you have a reason for what you're doing, it's like always a yes and situation. You know, coming from improv, I think he's very generous in that way of like, I like what you did, but I think maybe this, you know, and then, oh, maybe we found something together. And so it's best idea wins always. And yeah, we just really lean into that, like what people laugh about. And I'm really, I'll bring in our team, our post team. I think everybody just loves the show so much and play, and then the biggest laugh wins. And then when we play for producers or Apple, we'd be like, this got the biggest laugh in the room, sort of thing. And everyone's like, okay, because it's all good. I mean, I really am so lucky. Every day when I open a bin, no matter if it's our main characters, our day players, the acting in the show is just so rich and so fun and exciting to watch as an editor, that I really know how spoiled I am with just how good they are. They, you know, I'm so happy they're winning all the acting awards, because it's really good. Like it's every day when I open a bin, I'm like, oh, I have to live up to this. I have to honor these performances that they're giving, and like really bring my A game for them, because they are acting their butts off.
How many people work on your team to collaborate and make all these edits work? You mentioned your partner, AJ. When you have, you know, this Emmy-winning comedy series, how much editing does that take? Assistant editors, visual effects, or anything else? How many people are all collaborating to make this show work the way it does?
Yeah, so AJ and I split the episodes. We do every other one. And then we each have our assistants, Alex for AJ and Francesca for me. And then we have a VFX team, because there's actually a ton of VFX in Ted Lasso. All the stadium stuff, I mean, they just shoot that on a practice field, because you can't go to those big stadiums. And then we, you know, CG the stadium, the crowds, they'll shoot crowd plates, and then it's, you know, do the recreation. There's so much of that work, but we also do sneaky split screens and a lot. There's just a lot of VFX work that we that goes into it. So yeah, we have a VFX editor, and this season we brought in a VFX assistant, and then we have our team of post producers moving us along, because they're big episodes. And as I think people have fallen in love with the characters and the world, they've just gotten bigger, and we just feel such responsibility to the stories that we don't want to shortchange anything. So, our first cuts season 1 were much tighter, much shorter. Like maybe we just start joke, and then it was like, no, we're a place for the inhales and the exhales. Like we're not going to go 100 miles an hour, joke to joke. And so now we've expanded out in our first cuts of things, just so we can really live with these characters a little bit more, and then we kind of try to whittle down more towards the end. So yeah, we have a good team, but we're still kind of the original team from season 1. A lot of us are the same from season 1, and with some new people, because as the show's gotten bigger, we've needed to bring more people into the fold. So it's an expanding family that we really, I think we all just love Ted Lasso, and I like the show has kind of influenced us and how we relate to one another too, which has been really special. Like, we believe in the Ted Lasso mantra sort of thing. We've drank the Kool-Aid, if you will.
You won an American Cinema Editors Award last year for Make Rebecca Great Again, which is a great episode. You were nominated again this year for Rainbow. I love the last minutes of that episode of Roy, making his way back to the stadium. It feels very romantic comedy, only it's like a man and his team and not a man and his lover.
Yeah.
What did you like about that episode the most? What are some of your favorite scenes? And was that your favorite episode of the season for you?
Yes. Yeah. That one and Beard's Night Out were my two favorite. Okay. But yeah, that Rainbow is my heart. Like when I read that script, I was like, this is the romantic comedy that I always wanted to do. Like, I'm a huge Nora Ephron fan. I watch When Harry Met Sally once a year. I watch Sleepless in Seattle once a year. Those are like my films that just make me feel safe and warm. And talking with Jason about the episode, it was like, I love that this is a romantic comedy, and it's not a woman man story. It's like there's not that dynamic, but it's a romantic comedy. So yeah, when I read that script, I wrote to our music supervisor and I just said, I'm making a Nora Ephron movie. Can you send me like some music? And he was like, on it. And he sent me 150 tracks of just like, all that kind of like Louis Armstrong, just that vintage feel. And I just had a wonderful time going through that and finding different places for the cues. But yeah, the end of that episode is probably one of my favorite things that I ever got to put together. The Rainbow was scripted, and in an earlier episode, Higgins' wife calls him, and we knew at the end of 5 we were going to put the Rolling Stones, and it's because of Higgins' wife. That's his ringtone for his wife, and Jason goes, can we plant it? Like, I think it was like episode 3, and he's like, can we plant it there? It's like, and I remember at the time somebody wrote like, that's a pretty expensive ringtone to just drop there, and so we were able to go back and do that. But yeah, that came to me in pieces, all that end stuff. And so I would build it with the song. And I just knew that when Roy stopped to have his little chats with all the people along the way, I just wanted it to be the instrumental. And there's no instrumental that exists of that song. A lot of times that happens with older songs. So I would just like stretch the instrumental beats and just have a bad edit in the middle that I would hide somewhere. And every time I recut it, I would send it to my music editor and I would just say, can you make it sound pretty again and land everywhere I need it to land? Because I mean, when Higgins sees his wife, the lyric, it lands right on like when you see her dressed in blue and she's all in blue. Yep. And then you go to Keeley and she's dressed in gold and Keeley's in gold. And then when you get to the end and it lands on Nate, knowing where Nate was going to go, and the strings hit, the like that something's off, and that Nate's not happy about Roy coming back. And so I was like, please just make all those beats hit. And every time he would just, knock it out of the park. And so it was like a wonderful collaborative experience. And when Roy was making his decision to leave, I loved that moment. Like, originally I had cut it and I just was like, by the time we come back into the studio, Roy's in the studio, he sees his team warming up. They're like, watch your team warming up. And he's watching the team warming up. And then we go to the team on the field. Then we come back to Roy in the studio and the pundits are all talking to him. And at that point, I'm like, for him, he doesn't care what they're saying. He's made his decision to leave. So I wanted to stay on Roy for that whole, when people are like, oh, looks pretty cold there, Roy, huh? And everyone's talking to him. And then, I had cut a version where they're like, well, can we see everybody on camera? And I was like, no, go back. It's like, this is Roy's moment. This is his hero moment. He's going to make the decision to leave. And then he gets up and leaves. And that was also, where to start that cue. And I think like scripted, it was scripted to start earlier, but I was like, it feels like it needs to start right after he says, I've got to go. That's the line, And then I remember talking with Bill Rubel, who wrote the episode. And he was just like, that was a great place to start it, And so everybody was just like, brought their A game and then was open to the collaboration of like, now what serves it that we're in post. And so it was really that special thing where everybody was like, let's go, let's make this elevated, because it was just such, beautiful footage that Erica, the director, shot. And that's going to be one that's going to sit with me, whether it wins awards or not. It's going to be mine for my life. And, I don't know if I'll ever top it, sort of thing. It's like that special to me, that episode.
Oh, such a great episode.
Thank you.
Ted Lasso is streaming on Apple TV Plus. Melissa, congratulations on all of your work. Best of luck at this year's Emmy season, and thanks for chatting with Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby. I'm here with Felix Black, who edited the incredible nature docuseries Welcome to Earth on Nat Geo, which can be seen on Disney Plus. Felix, you've done most of your work in the documentary or docuseries genre. What do you love about documentary work and editing for documentaries specifically?
What you get to do is, in many documentaries, find a side of life that perhaps you couldn't have imagined was there before. And you have the great privilege to show this and to tell these stories to sometimes a vast audience. And that can give you an insight into other people, other cultures, science, and stories that are an absolute joy to edit and to bring to the wider world.
And have you always had an appreciation for science and nature and history? I mean, is that where your main interests lie as a filmmaker?
Science indeed, but also what's been wonderful is to find soulful aspects. I've been very blessed to work on documentaries which actually find that the last remaining hunter-gatherer tribes left on the planet, and to actually explore the world and to see how humans live in a way that's completely alien perhaps to our Western lifestyles, but to actually explore how they survive and how they view the world is absolutely stunning in terms of seeing another side to life that perhaps most people don't even know exists still on this planet.
The most recent check I did, Welcome to Earth has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, people love this show, and for good reason. It's fascinating. We have Will Smith going into different parts of the world, sort of taking us on journeys that most of us will never go on. For me, I was like terrified by the second episode of going to the bottom of the ocean. I can't even imagine that. Which episode for you contained activities you would be the least likely to participate in?
Oh, the thing is, I was so impressed and staggered actually going through the rushes and seeing, oh my word, Will Smith is doing that. As you've alluded to already, going over 3,000 feet underneath the ocean in this tiny submersible, which is literally creaking. You know, if that goes at that depth under the ocean, nothing's going to help you. You know, within a second, you are absolutely, that's it, gone. I don't think I could do that. Similarly, peering over an actual live volcano and going down into the crater on the Pacific island of Tanna, one hot lava bomb comes out and you're a goner. There's literally nothing, even if you've got 1,000 people in terms of a safety crew around you, there's nothing that's going to prevent that from killing you, basically. So it was an absolute joy to see Will Smith putting his life on the line alongside the wonderful team that helped create this series. And as an editor, you can enjoy it from your own, you know, the safety of your edit suite. So I'm quite happy about that.
Yeah, so how did you get involved in the project in the first place? How did you get that call and find out you'd be working on such a fun series?
Yeah, I got the call and was invited to join, which was an absolutely fantastic, world-beating team. And when you get asked onto that type of project, it is a real thrill, and you know that you will be working with people who are literally, you're standing on the shoulders of giants when you get to work on a series such as this. And it's an absolute thrill to be involved and to go editing across the planet on things which are absolutely revelatory, and sometimes people have never seen or heard these things before. So yeah, getting the call and actually being spoken to about this project was fantastic, and you know straight away that, hey, yeah, that's something I want to be involved with.
And there's 6 episodes, and I mean, they're essentially sort of short films because they don't necessarily need to be watched in sequence or anything. Is that how you treated it, as sort of a series of short films, or do you have to also make sure, you know, there's a common thread in some way between all 6?
Well, you can't ever lose a thread because you've got Will Smith. The whole, you know, you actually see the fear of that man, and this is a legend of the movies, but within Welcome to Earth, he is really in the movies.
Yeah, there's
no second take. If that submarine goes wrong underneath the ocean, you can't come back from that. There's no second take on the live volcano. So, for instance, he's off the Bahamas, going deep under the ocean. He's on the South Pacific island of Tanna. He's going across the Serengeti. So each film, in effect, in terms of his adventure, is its own movie. But then, of course, you have the adventures that are with him, and also the other stories which speak to the journey Will Smith himself is on. So exploring the world of sound, exploring the world of color, for instance. And so each film will become, to begin with, a very large self-contained film. Absolutely.
And what was the most challenging scene or episode for you to edit out of all of them, and what made it challenging?
Well, they each do have their own. Nothing is ever perfect, and there always are things that are difficult. First of all, to shoot and to capture, but also the stories can be extremely complicated in terms of sometimes we're working with cutting-edge science, and in order to make that palatable and also trying to make it meaningful and weaving that into a story of revelation through the eyes of Will Smith. It is a joy, but obviously there are complicated aspects to the shoot and to actually putting these films together, which do require, well, basically it's a heart and soul job. And sometimes you have a revelation, particularly when you're talking about some of the adventures that Will was with, and specifically when he's going up the live volcano in Tanna, and his adventurer friend Eric. We had to explore sound with Will Smith and with the adventurer Eric, knowing that Eric himself is hearing things that most people can't detect, and that's because he's blind. But we wanted to communicate that in a way that was fair and made sense to the adventure itself. but a lot of the times, when a difficulty arose, Will Smith had a natural way to go, hey, oh yeah, this was unscripted. So you can follow Will basically through these adventures. And to a certain extent, it's all there because of his respect and intrigue and wonder and fear. You can literally, when you're working with someone like him, it's like riffing with a band. It's there.
How long did this whole project take? Because each episode seems so grand in scope. I mean, they all seem like a movie. How long was the process?
The editing itself, we're talking over a year.
Wow.
In terms of editing, but the production itself has been in gestation and basically, you know, we're talking many years of work, I'd say.
And what sort of collaboration do you have to take part in to make sure everything gets edited the way everyone is happy with in the end?
Well, there's 6 films, and each made up of many adventures across the globe, and so there's a big team involved. There are fantastic other editors, sound designers. You're talking about wonderful producers, directors, cinematographers, the execs, and also where everything then goes through Darren Aronofsky. So literally, that job was like, Welcome to Earth was like getting to play with the Beatles. You know, you couldn't really go far wrong. It was literally opening up each adventure was Christmas morning, and you had it sweet.
And you can't control some things, especially in documentaries. Was there anything that they just said, you know what, scrap the whole thing. This episode didn't work. We have to move on.
Well, no, there was nothing that was absolutely written off.
Okay.
And certainly there are elements of each adventure where you go, hey, we don't have the time to explore every single aspect. And also as you're riffing with the band, as it were, within each narrative of each film, sometimes to maintain the focus, part of the adventure will be waylaid or you know, put in the back burner. But that's literally to make the film itself sing.
Welcome to Earth from Nat Geo is currently streaming on Disney+. Felix, congratulations on your great work. Best of luck at this year's Emmys, and thank you for taking some time to chat with Gold Derby today.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, Senior Editor for Gold Derby. Welcome to our Meet the Experts panel with TV editors. I'm joined by Robert Martinez from the documentary Lucy and Desi on Amazon Prime, Jamie Martin from the reality TV competition RuPaul's Drag Race on VH1, Melissa McCoy from the comedy series Ted Lasso on Apple TV+, and Felix Black from the docuseries Welcome to Earth from Nat Geo, streaming on Disney+. I love the diversity of the projects of this lineup. We have something from every genre. So thanks for joining me today. I wanted to start by asking each of you, editing isn't the most glamorous job in show business. As kids, we see actors and maybe Spielberg and these grand directors. So I'm curious, when each of you discovered editing and then realized that you could make a career out of it, and what led to that first opportunity in show business? I'll start with you, Robert.
I guess it would have been my wife's path to the industry. She went to Cal State Fullerton in the film program. I was still doing odd jobs. I think I was like a senior portrait photographer at it's like Life Touch or something. So I had like a creative itch and I had no direction. So I was like, oh, this is cool, it's photography. And I was like, oh no, this is a bad idea. No disrespect to all the photographers out there. But I helped on her sets for student films and stuff. Quickly figured out that I liked there was a creative outlet there. I did not like being on set though. It was just a lot of hurrying up to wait, and it's just like it gave me a panic attack. But I thought, well, I don't want to be on set. I can't be the one that necessarily paints the picture, but I can say what I don't like about the picture and curate it and do that. So I I thought, oh, well, maybe editing. And that turned out to be the right move. So I went back to school in my late 20s, early 30s, and then was ready to get into it. So just made a natural, I naturally got steered towards documentaries through internships. And I just kind of never looked back. So got very lucky, but yeah, grateful for her sort of guidance.
Jamie, what drew your interest and then led you to where you are?
So I actually got into it in high school. I had a teacher assign a kind of odd project. It was like do a video inspired by all of the things that we'd read in an English class. And so I don't even think before that point I was aware of what editing was. And when I finally sat down in front of a computer after filming this thing, I was very interested in how little changes in pace and tone and everything affected how my audience viewed what I was doing. And so I kind of really enjoyed being the link between what happened on set and how your audience processes the emotion of it. And that's kind of what sparked my imagination in that way. And so I went to school at Chapman University for film editing. And then after that, I just started doing it. So I've kind of I've known I liked being behind the scenes and being creative in this way for a long time. So
What software did your high school have? This is fascinating to me.
My
I did not
gosh.
go to that kind of high school.
I don't even remember. It was not my high school. I had it at home. It was like
Okay.
Studio 7 or something like that. It was pre-Avid, like at home studios type stuff. It was really rough. I remember being like, I spent hours and hours just troubleshooting this dang program, but I was like, you know what? If I didn't have to troubleshoot so much, this would be really fun.
Melissa, what about you?
Yeah, so I was at Michigan State University struggling with what I wanted to do with my life. And I was a student athlete, actually. I was on the crew team, and which may be why I love Ted Lasso so much, but I'm a sports person. But I was like, you know what? I don't want to do athletics my whole life. And this isn't, I have to figure out what I want to do with my life. So I knocked around there for 2 years, having every major under the sun. And then I was like, you know what? I just want to tell stories about all these things I'm learning about, like all of my majors. I just want to be involved in like stories. I've always been an avid reader and a TV watcher, a movie lover. But I was in Michigan, and that was very scary because it's like, how do you do that in Michigan? And Michigan State didn't really have a program, but I found one at Western where it was like everything in their description was called broadcast and cable production, and everything in that description of every class you got to take for that major, I was like, yes. And so there was a production class where you wrote and shot. I mean, it was just all very like you doing it with a video camera. So, wrote the script and I acted in it. I got all my friends to act in it. So we were just doing everything. And then I would take it to the editing room, and they were using Final Cut there. And I was just like, this is it. This is the best part of it, like taking the footage and then making it. And I just loved that feeling. I just love the feeling of a cut, and I still love the feeling of a beautiful cut, where it's just that, it just makes it something people laugh at, people, if it gives me goosebumps. I love putting music in. I just love the whole part of it. And then from there, I found out in that area, I was the gung ho. Like I was the only one ever in the editing room. I was the only one ever like, yes, I want to do more. Like I did an internship with a local cable company where we did local area commercials. And I was like, I want to do this. I gotta go. And so then I went to Chapman University and got my master's in film editing there. And from there, I found out about the ACE internship, and I applied for that and got that. And then that was the end. I shadowed some great editors there, and one of the stops was at CSI. And when I got done with that internship, they had a job. And so then I went and kind of cut my teeth being an assistant there, and they were so generous with showing me more. And that was such a juggernaut of a 22 episode machine. for years and years. So it was a great entree into the world.
Felix, how about you?
I was at St Martin's Art College in London, and I was working making sculptures out of concrete, working in photography, paint, metalwork, woodwork. But all of the time I had headphones on, and I started to realize that this was like some sort of soundtrack, and whatever I was doing, whether I liked it or not, I could kind of see another way through it whilst listening to the music at the same time. And then I got more and more into photography, and then started to do projections. And I would then get an old photograph of my grandparents, and I asked my parents to come up, and I projected this photograph of my granddad and grandmother onto my real life mother and father, who are still here and still with us. My grandparents are long gone. And I lined up the projection, their eyes onto the closed eyelids of my parents. And I was in the scene, in this dark room with this projection on my parents, and the power that kind of seeped out of it, I knew it was just amazing. And I was trying to do an experiment where I could control time itself, and it sounds absolutely stupid, but of course that's the time to do that sort of thing, is at art college. And I then would film these little mini productions, and when I look back at it, it was almost like a ghost or something other that I couldn't really put my finger on. And this gave me a thrill of it felt so significant, even if it was just to me, that I knew, oh, this moving image, this slight moving image, this music altogether got me into using the art college's Avid, and then making short films, video installations. And obviously when art college finishes, you've got no money, completely poor. So I became a runner in a post-production facility, and hung on every single editor's words, tried to learn everything I could, serving tea, pressing those bloody buttons when allowed, and literally that's how, the short story of getting into making documentaries.
When you were young or a kid, was there a film or TV show that you just couldn't get enough of? Like I came upon Stand By Me the other day, and I'm like, I watched the whole thing. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to lie about having a time that I had to be home. I lied about a curfew. I said I had to be home at 9, but I really just wanted to go home and watch reruns of Matlock. Was there any TV show or film as a kid that you just loved, Robert?
I'm not sure. TV show, it was different. I think I'm probably on the last stop for this in this panel, at least. Is there was reruns. We didn't have streaming. You had to see it in real time. So I remember, must see TV. What was it, Tuesdays or something like that. I think I can't pin on a TV show or a specific movie, but I think the idea of viewing in real time with your parents, talking about it the next day at school, or stuff like that, I think resonated with me. It felt like an event, and I remember that most about childhood. Like TV and stuff like that was different. It was you had to be there. It's similar to, I think, sports are still like that. You still have that. You have to see it that day. I'm not going to watch a basketball game 3 days from when it aired. And that's the way TV used to be. And I'm kind of nostalgic about that.
That's true. Jamie, how about you?
Growing up, my parents were kind of really anti-TV, actually. So we had like 4 VHSs in our house, and that has led to a very interesting connection with movies like White Christmas and South Pacific and Sound of Music. Very odd choices for like a 5-year-old or 6-year-old to be like very into, but I watched those movies so much that I feel like I was able to analyze them at a young age, you know what I mean, and like them for very different things, different musical abilities and cinematography things, that I don't know that most kids noticed. But that's what my childhood was mostly filled with, which is really strange saying it out loud. I let my kid watch TV. I'm like, you watch TV, you like that Paw Patrol, go for it.
I can relate. I had 3 older sisters, and I saw Pretty Woman probably more times than any other 10-year-old boy did at the time.
Right. It's what you
Melissa,
have on
Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, I would think I was the opposite because my mom was a nurse who worked nights. And so it was just like, and my dad was just like, whatever, whatever you want to do. So I watched a lot of television, a lot of movies that I probably shouldn't have watched. Like you think about it now and you're like, thanks, mom and dad, but whatever. Enjoyed myself. But yeah, you had to be home. I think it was like, I always wanted to be home because you had a specific, every day it was like my lineup of TV, or, you know, I loved feel good movies that made me laugh. Like I think I saw Clue a bunch of times, or Soap. I remember Soap Dish, loving that. What a silly comedy. And yeah, it was just a lot of TV. I loved all TV. I loved, you know, in my day it was Family Ties. I loved Golden Girls. I loved, like, I don't know. What a, you know, wonderful time of television, of just great characters and all. Like, where's the Golden Girls reboot is what I want to know. Like, you know, we need those ladies back. But yeah. And then the movie that made me want to go to film school was Good Will Hunting. I could watch that over and over and over again. There's something about that style of filmmaking. And it's funny, it came up around Ted Lasso. We had some homages to Good Will Hunting, and I told Jason, I was like, you know, I had that poster on my wall at college. It was like, that's what I want to make. And so we had a big discussion about that and our love of that movie.
Felix, how about you?
When I was very young, I would have reoccurring dreams about Star Wars. That was such a vast, massive world that seemed almost real to me. But one of the biggest impacts was actually being taken to the theatre by my parents when I was little, and seeing Andrew Lloyd Webber's The Phantom of the Opera with the original cast back in the 80s. And that absolutely knocked my socks off. Those performances and the music, the thrill, the chandelier, everything about that before, it was absolutely barnstorming for me. And then a few years later, Tim Burton's Batman came out. Batman the movie with Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson, that absolutely was such a big deal to me. I literally lived and breathed Batman when I was a boy. The Prince soundtrack, the Danny Elfman score, the marriage, or everything within that film, the scenes, the humor, the theater within Tim Burton's Batman, I still can watch that film and it gives me the biggest thrill, the biggest joy. And it was only recently that I found out that when they were making that film, Tim Burton apparently went to see The Phantom of the Opera, and that dictated how the end of Batman from 1989 was finished. It gave him the spur to create the ending to that film itself. And when I read that, I thought, bingo, that's why I love those things too much. I could sense something that was there that I've only realized now. Yeah.
And Felix, are those your arcade games? Is this your office?
This is my edit suite. I have a wonderful PC here, an ultra-wide monitor, so I can drag the Avid timeline thousands of miles across the monitor speakers, everything proper. Man's world is here, but these are actual portals into other worlds. I mean, Will Smith was only welcome to Earth, yeah? Each one of these is a monolith to arcade wonderment, and if I could make an edit that in 40 years time would be allowed to stand in a monolith like this in the back of someone's room, then I know I've done a good job. So they are arcade machines, but they're also portals into other universes.
I'm so jealous. Well, I want to thank each of you again, Felix, Robert, Melissa, Jamie. Such great work this television season. Good luck to all of you at this year's Emmys. You're all so deserving of everything that comes your way. And it was such a pleasure to speak with each of you today.
Thanks, Den.
Thank you so much.